think anyone who is not looking at what is happening with electrification and AI in general is probably behind the times. I feel myself sometimes behind the times with how fast the pace is moving for technology and the use and application of AI. I see that this is, not to sound banal, but this is a trend that is not going to go away. Automation of a lot of processes is going to continue. And I think that the the way forward for success is there's going to be a duality of people who need to continue to go very deep in areas of expertise so that they can leverage these AI tools in ways that can help them do that faster and better. But at the same time, there's also going to be a need for people who are generalists in the field so that they can see the connections between things and understand how, again, to relate technology and people.
Welcome to the Blue Ocean Solutions podcast, where we dive into real conversations with business owners, innovators, and industry leaders reshaping the future of clean tech, construction, and the renewable energy sectors. I'm Kreel Hutchinson, your host. Our guest today is Kristin Barbato, the founder and CEO of Build Edison. We'll be discussing her journey building companies in the dynamic energy and climate sector, and how she's helping innovators navigate complex landscapes from technology to scalable solutions. If you're a founder in renewable energy, clean tech, or energy-aligned engineering, you're going to love the show because Kristin shares invaluable insights on building impactful businesses and leveraging innovation to drive the energy transition forward. It's an example of how strategic vision and powerful networks are shaping the future of sustainable industries. Welcome to the podcast, Kristin.
Thanks so much, Kreel. It's great to be here.
So for people who are unfamiliar with you and maybe your background and the work that you do in the world and your company, why don't you give yourself a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. Thanks so much. I have been working in energy for a gazillion years, it seems, and it keeps changing. The landscape keeps changing. So when you say energy, it really depends upon where you are and what your perspective is on what the industry means. But I started out as an engineer at a utility. So I started out as thinking about energy as electrons. And then as I shifted gears in my own career, I moved from working in utilities and looking at the grid, and then working with developers and doing actual projects that can help bring either energy efficiency or renewables, even cogens to big buildings in an urban environment. And then also did some interesting work in bringing some of the energy management practices that people need to consider as they're thinking about how to be efficient, what their purchases are, what kinds of fuel they're buying, is it renewable, compliance and regulation. And this was part of my job that I had when I was the Chief Energy Management Officer for New York City under Mayor Bloomberg, running the sustainability plan. Actually, I think it was the US's first citywide sustainability plan, Plan YC at the time. Now there's been several and it's been great. But that was a fascinating job because you encountered every single type of operation within city life that we had to energize and be really smart about how we were thinking about doing it sustainably. So then after working for these giant entities, big utilities and big developer and big citywide administrative kind of function there, I started my own business. And then I started another new business. So I went from being in these huge institutions and being kind of a change agent in bringing new technologies or new solutions or new processes to these giant organizations to helping to do that for others that are in the industry. And that's where I started Build Edison. And then not much later, a friend of mine who I've known for years approached me and said, I have this great idea and you're going to help me build it. And so that's how Dynamo Energy Hub was built. So we founded that, and now I get to work with all kinds of great people and doing things that I love in the industry.
Well, the arc of your career has gone through many different versions, and you've gotten to wear several different hats. Throughout that all, when I speak to entrepreneurs and people in the industry, there's usually some kind of driving, reason behind their work. And sometimes that changes over the years. So what was the real drive? Like what gets you excited about your work? What gets you to show up, year after year in this industry?
Yeah, it sounds kind of odd that I went from these giant organizations to becoming much more of an entrepreneur. But I think the thing that drove me was that I always wanted to see if could I run my own business and how could I help people by doing so. And I think my roots of that were in these giant organizations. I hate this term, but it sort of fits. I was kind of an intrapreneur where I was generating new ideas and then building processes and teams around them and seeing how these solutions could meet the market and what was happening in the market to drive them. So I think my spark was having the opportunity and the flexibility in these big organizations to do something new and create teams to address that. So then what gets me up in the morning is I love talking with people about a new idea and how it will get implemented, not just the idea itself, but I think my engineering nature, which is what I actually studied in college a long, long time ago, is to build things, and hence it's partly why the name Build Edison. Kind of a tip of the hat to Thomas Edison, as well as some of my former employers that I've gotten to work with. But the concept of building on innovation. So that's really what gets me up in the morning. That and my dog.
Fantastic. So as we dive a little deeper then into your company and the work, the value proposition that you guys do in the world, how would you describe Build Edison? Can you explain to the audience exactly what those two value propositions are?
Sure. So for Build Edison, it's really how do we think about bringing innovative solutions to the market that are specific to, I'd say, grid and efficiency and renewables, clean energy solutions to the market. So if you are the value that we bring is if you are a newer company or you're an expanding company, we've worked with large and small startups and huge corporations, global corporations that have a new product and they're trying to figure out how it fits. If they are either coming from international or trying to move into a new market. I have a lot of experience working with bringing people and their solutions to from a earlier stage TRL to a later stage TRL technology readiness level and doing that through either developing programs or identifying pilot projects and other project partners that can help them scale and learn as they do so. For Dynamo, it's a very interesting concept and it relates a lot to the work that I do every day. But Dynamo is a different operation altogether. It is, we're striving to be the world's biggest and best energy transition network. So as we are bringing together people who are leaders and companies that are leaders from giant corporations like the names like Google and Microsoft or National Grid and others in traditional energy companies as well. Companies, investors at all stages, startups who are changing the world, and also government and nonprofits. Instead of being a trade organization, Dynamo's purpose is to bring together people who can help them collaborate and accelerate. And so we do that through several different ways. We have some really great marquee events that we do. We're really the connector. That's the crux of what Dynamo is leveraging and building your network for what you need to accelerate in this industry as it's changing. So I guess the connector between the two is having been a co-founder of Dynamo and seeing that grow and now focusing on some of the work that I'm doing with other organizations such as Open Minds, which is a nonprofit. I love doing work with their next gen program, so I can tell you all about that too.
Build Edison and Dynamo Energy Hub. Obviously, there's a lot of collaboration. And as you build out your client base in Build Edison, are those clients coming through Dynamo Energy Hub? Like they're seeing you, they're seeing what you're capable of, they're having conversations there, or is it the other way? Are some of the clients that you work with then moving into Dynamo Energy Hub? I could really see that as being a flywheel effect of groups moving between those two.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that The networks have kind of merged almost organically, and I can't really tell if one is pushing the other, is pushing which way it's pushing more. But what I can say is it's fantastic to be able to leverage a broad network to be able to do what you want to do in the industry. So, for example, I work with companies that are focused on bringing technologies to the market that might be very for like prop tech or for building efficiency, or they may be related to navigating how we build a better grid or connect to it in real time faster. So I think it's the network effect that we have here that is kind of complementing each other. And that's why I like some of the projects that I get to work on. So the the network person in me, the community builder person in me loves the fact that I get to have this wonderful vehicle in Dynamo with our members. But the engineer and the process oriented person in me loves to dig into the details with some of the work that I'm doing to help build these programs or technology pathways for other companies. And that's really where it connects there. In fact, I'm doing quite a lot of work with, like I mentioned, the company or the nonprofit Open Minds organization, which is a very unique thing in the market space now and really critically needed. And the genesis of that came through Dynamo.
Cool. And so when you're speaking to so many people, you're obviously would be a great person to get a very good sense of where the industry is and where it's headed, what are the challenges, what trends are working for and against you. Do you want to speak a little bit about that? What are you seeing in the industry overall?
So that's a great question. I think anyone who is not looking at what is happening with electrification and AI in general is probably behind the times. I feel myself sometimes behind the times with how fast the pace is moving for technology and the use and application of AI. I I see that this is, not to sound banal, but this is a trend that is not going to go away. Automation of a lot of processes is going to continue. And I think that the the way forward for success is there's going to be a duality of people who need to continue to go very deep in areas of expertise so that they can leverage these AI tools in ways that can help them do that faster and better. But at the same time, there's also going to be a need for people who are generalists in the field so that they can see the connections between things and understand how, again, to relate technology and people. I don't think we're ever going to go away from needing technology and people, but how they work together is definitely evolving. And that's no different for the energy landscape when you think about how much more demand is being required of our electric grid and the implications that that means for our environment. It's a real issue. The questions are that need to be answered are, do we have enough energy resources? How do we deploy them? How do we get to them faster? But how do we also make sure that we're not doing this in a way that is going to pollute or damage our environment? And that's really where, just to tie in another thread, where the group Open Minds comes in. And that's why we forged this partnership with Dynamo. And now I'm working a lot with them to run their next gen program. Their whole thesis is we have a dual challenge of requiring and needing more energy, but having to do it with less emissions and cleanly. So as we look to the future, we're really looking at how we are going to meet the demands of energy requirements for all of us, not just these big corporations who are putting in data centers, but for all of us in our everyday lives. And how do we do that, which affects our civilization? Civilization growth is tied directly to the advent and expansion of energy systems. But at the same time, you've seen the emissions grow at a similar pace with these types of technology advances and deployments. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. And that's why I really like working with people who have the ideas to do this and roll up their sleeves to actually implement it.
We are definitely living through a very interesting period as AI becomes interwoven into everything that we do.
Mm.
And I think some people have concerns about that, rightfully so in some areas. Some people are very optimistic. Yes, there's obviously, we need a lot of energy, but we have more creative minds and solutions than we ever had. So as you have your finger on the kind of the heartbeat of your network in speaking to a lot of people, do you get a general sense that people are optimistic? They're excited about, where renewables have come, as now it's a maturing market in very different ways. Changing administration, creates a different trends, but overall, the industry has really grown up and there's so much great clean tech and renewables out there. Do you get a sense that people are optimistic and, ready for what's coming over the next 10 years of really helping humanity meet this demand?
I think there's a cautious optimism and so I recently was at a great conference, Zero Week, which is kind of divided into two conferences now that it's gotten so large. And the one conference is looking at very much geopolitical large trends and what that means to the energy industry across the board. And the other part of the conference is looking at the technological advances and what that means to the industry across the board. And so I think every year that you're looking at what's happening from these two perspectives at the industry, depending upon the administration, depending upon world events, you're going to get a very different lens. So in some cases, there's the different wars that are happening in the world that are putting direct pressure on what's happening with energy markets at large and how that's impacting people every day. You can see it when you go to the gas station now too. So that has this there was people that came away from that part of the conference going, "Can we do this?" And then there's the other perspective that came from the conference, which was wonderful, which is complementing that and saying, "Yes, we can. We can get through this using advances in technology, advancements in collaboration with each other because you can't innovate alone." So I think that there's again this duality that's happening with cautious nature of what is happening in the world markets and how that affects us. But at the same time, when you talk with people about their technologies, their gains and their advances, their concepts, and how they've actually seen this work, there's a lot of hope. So I think that it's both sides, but when you're talking specifically about some of the advances that we have, I'd say this about any technology. You can kind of use it for good or evil. It depends upon how you're thinking about this in the application. So I sincerely hope that some of the optimists that we have in the industry are really pressing forward because I think that that's really what's going to drive positive change. And we see it happening.
I hope so too. And that's what I actually feel there's a bright future ahead with a lot of creative solutions that will hopefully find the foundation and the growth they deserve. As you grow out your business, your network, how do you predominantly invite more and more people into the conversation? Like, how do you build your business with Build Edison? How do you grow your membership with Dynamo Energy Hub?
Yeah, that's a great question. Someone once told me a long time ago that if you ever have a conversation, this is kind of like a professional tip, but then a life tip. So if you ever find yourself in a conversation where you finally get that meeting, you finally get to talk with the person, you never want to leave the discussion at the end of it. You always want to see if you can find a thread that is a connecting piece that you can touch upon and build upon from there. So it's not just the one interaction. If there's actual real meaning there, you can find that there's a thread that you want to pull on further and grow the conversation or the relationship. And I think that that's what's really special about what we're building, not only in Dynamo, but how we work with some of the innovators in Build Edison and what we're doing with other groups that I work with, like the Swedish Energy Agency. I've worked a lot with NYSERDA and I've worked a lot with other companies that are startups. Aside from the plethora of the network within Open Minds itself. So the tie that binds in all of these is, I would say, it's important to find what is the reason for your next engagement with that, and then how do you grow from there mutually. That's, I think, the real key to having a great network is figuring out how you can mutually benefit from the relationships and sharing knowledge, sharing and collaborating together. So often we've seen people who appear to be competitors wind up finding a white space that they can fill together. And I think that that's pretty great.
What are some of the challenges you're seeing or bottlenecks you're seeing in the industry, potentially in your own business and projects? Where are things getting stalled?
I think there's a few answers to that, but an obvious one to me is that regulation and policy seems to always lag technology. So if you're thinking about the advancements in technology, AI or grid solutions or building solutions or even consumer products that relate to energy and sustainability, what does this mean in terms of the regulatory drive to move forward? Is it permitting that is stopping us? In many cases, projects are stopped by permitting. Not that there isn't willing finance, not that there isn't a willing technological solution. It's how does this actually fit within this landscape, this jurisdiction, and are we allowed to move forward with it from whatever the permitting of the regulatory environment is? I think that there are very good reasons to have permitting and regulation, but at the same time, if it's hindering good technological advances that can help people and processes and the betterment of making our whatever our ultimate goals are as people and trying to live healthy and exciting community like lives in a community, that energy seems to be one that is always at the base of this. And as we are finding cleaner solutions that can help communities, one bottleneck that seems to always come up is permitting. And so that's a tricky one.
How do you see or envision maybe AI and automation potentially accelerating those processes and helping innovators navigate the complex landscape of these regulatory hurdles?
I'll give you a really specific example that relates to the grid. I'm working with a wonderful company that's at its early stages, but showing really great signs of success called Grid GPT. Their whole purpose is to use agentic AI to help in two ways for developers and utilities. So if you've got a new solar system that you're trying to connect to your local utility, or you've got a big data center that you want to connect in some manner, these all go into a queue for the utilities to analyze and determine how does this fit? Will it fit their needs? Can we meet this? And so this interconnection queue has gotten super long. So this is one of the harbingers of growth, but at the same time, if we're stuck in a line waiting to see how the utility can approve this or does it fit within the network, this can take a long time. So what they've done in their very specific type of technology application is to understand what the utilities needs are, their transmission planning now and in the future, and how all of these interconnection requests can be evaluated much faster, from taking 18 months to 3 years to evaluate to cutting it down to weeks and months, so that developers, investors, consumers all can get a much better picture of where their project lies in terms of viability. And the utility and the surrounding areas and their stakeholders can also see how these fit in and how they fit in, or if they don't, so that you're taking the brains of transmission engineering, and transmission planning, and helping this along in a faster, more robust way. So I think that these are applications that can be really well suited to accelerating the timeline it takes for approvals or permitting.
Well, that's a great example of how technology could really help accelerate these timelines. So that's an exciting future if we could get more projects off the ground faster. Kind of dovetails into my next question around the work that you do with Dynamo Energy Hub. How do you leverage the community and collaboration to overcome the inherent complexities and resource limitations often faced by startups and innovators in this sector?
Super question. Super question. Like I said, you can't innovate alone. You can't build a company on your own either. You really need to understand what your service is, or your product, and how it meets the market. And since the market is constantly evolving and changing, having interactions with people who are in those roles can help give you a lot of great perspective. So not only does Dynamo give people the ability to talk about what it is they're doing, but also to find their partners, to find their investors, to find their next client, their next customer, their next deal. And it is within these conversations that people find nuggets of not just hope, but actual practical application and collaboration. And we have multiple stories of success of companies that have been Dynamo members that met at one of our events or reconnected because we saw that there was a great synergy between them and that deals got done over and over and over again as they started to partner. And Dynamo doesn't benefit from those. We benefit from having the network that actually brings them together and seeing the success of that. And I think that that's part of what makes it so successful is because our is to put together the right people to find themselves their own deals and how they want to structure them. And that's kind of fun.
That is fun. Talking about success, what does success look like for you this year in both of these projects in regards to growth?
Sure. I can talk about it from a few different levels. So for Dynamo, we have several big events this year. We have our annual, we just finished doing a great event in Houston, bringing together about 100 high level executives and to talk about what's going on with data centers and utilities and the deals that they're doing right now and how this is impacting the market, making it almost like a model going forward. And big companies like Google. Then we have for Dynamo, we also have our annual Martha's Vineyard Summer Summit, which is again kind of the same thing, but it's a longer duration, 3 days, where we get really it's the curated, intimate room of just the high level thinkers and doers in the industry. And what is it that we're working on today? So that's a really good one. And then we have another one, of course, our annual event in New York City for Climate Week, which is always a smash hit. We have some great speakers and the networking there is amazing. We've seen a lot of really good success stories come from those. So on the Dynamo front, we've got great things happening there, including a new partnership with a company called DrivePath, which has talking about telling stories. They're fantastic at telling stories and helping corporations navigate the very murky and strange waters of what can happen in communication. So great partnership that we're developing there. Then from other work that we're doing is I've got a program that I work with the Swedish Energy Agency called Skyline. And we're bringing some of these Swedish innovators from the Stockholm area and around there that have urban innovations that have grown and demonstrated success in Sweden and now are looking to expand to the US. So we've got some great programming happening there. And then, of course, last but not least, we've got some work that I'm doing with um, Open Minds, which is the nonprofit that I told you about before. And I didn't tell you what I actually do with them. Not only is Open Minds a convener of people who are thinking about the dual challenge of more energy and less emissions and getting this done fast, but one of the first impact projects that they launched was a project or a program called Next Gen, which is developing the next generation of energy and climate leaders. So we've just recruited our next cohort of 32 amazing graduate students from all over. And they are STEM, they are business students, they are policy students, and doing that programming for them. So we've got a new cohort for them. And then another group that I work with, which does fantastic work on the grid, is Stony Brook University. Just help them get a great grant for about $10 million to advance projects in the grid. And later this year, they will be part of the Advanced Energy Conference in New York City. So lots and lots of things on the calendar happening, and the worlds kind of blend together. So as I get to do all this work with fantastic people and get to talk to you about it, I feel very privileged that 2026 is going to be a roller coaster of a fantastic year.
It sure sounds like it. That's a great agenda that you've got in front of you. As a leader in the energy and climate area, what are some of the most exciting yet challenging emerging technologies you're seeing, and how do you help companies bridge the gap from the technology to scalable solution?
That's great. There's a few that are somewhat controversial that
Let's hear them.
seem hey, anybody ever hear of nuclear?
Yes.
Always a showstopper. Nobody loves to talk about it, but small modular reactors are becoming much more the focus of being able to have a solution for a clean load that can adapt for really great purposes. We have seen the applications of this in many different areas, but now that it is coming to much more mainstream, does this give us more flexibility with our load, especially at a time when load demand is very, very high and not going away anytime soon? Another area that I think is of utmost importance, and this is something that I've learned quite a lot about in my work with Open Minds, is the implications of methane abatement in a time when I believe a portfolio approach of different types of energy resources is the only way to move forward with such energy demand. We have to make sure that we're actually cleaning up the types of energy resources that we currently have while we are building cleaner ones. So I think methane abatement is an area that is a very interesting avenue that our next geners in the Open Minds program are going to be exploring further. And then the last one, so I've talked a lot about AI, but when we're talking about the nexus between energy and climate, methane abatement is one. And I also think another one that has struggled but does show signs of promise is one that I don't claim to be an expert in, but carbon capture. So again, with the theme of we have a lot of energy need, and then we can't really shoot ourselves in the foot by just taking away all these energy resources that aren't as clean as new ones that we can develop. But what we should be doing is figuring out how we can clean these up and develop the cleaner ones as well. So I think that these are areas that's going to be something of focus. While people, companies, governments all grapple with large, almost unbelievable energy growth, and how do we supply it?
Amazing. Yeah, we've had several people on the podcast talking about carbon capture with some really wonderful ideas.
Yeah,
And I'm in a kind of a privileged point where I get to speak to a lot of different people with a lot of great ideas. And I can just see there's a smorgasbord of solutions out there, all at different levels of technology and, viable commercial scalability levels, but really exciting times, and it doesn't need them all to work out, but even if a small percentage were to be able to become feasible, we really start to make an impact on creating fantastic clean technologies and also being able, as you pointed out accurately, also to be able to clean up what energies we're currently been using for many, many years. So
yeah.
I love your insights there. I think they're spot on. As we look towards the conclusion of this, where do you, in general, you kind of just focused on it there, where do you see the industry in general going in the next 10 years?
Great. Great question. 10 years sounds like a millennium at this point because technology and policy is changing things so rapidly. I think the one constant that we can rely upon over the course of the next 10 years is that and I'm very biased as I work with amazing people, we need to invest not only in new technology, but in developing the next generation of these kinds of leaders. So, who are the leaders going to be that are going to help us with breakthrough technologies? Who are the leaders going to be that are going to bring a new perspective on something that we may have been looking at for 20 years, but is there a perspective that can come from a fresh set of eyes or a new lens of people to asking questions that may not have been asked before? So I think over the course of the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more AI and a bifurcation of extreme experts and generalists working in the energy industry. But the one thing that I think will stand true is that our need for community will continue to be very strong. So whether you are in the Dynamo network or you are a young leader in the next gen program who will be part of these open minds and Dynamo industry leaders and executives in short order, I think that the one standard that we're going to see going through is the need for community in the midst of all this technology is going to be paramount.
I love that answer, and I'll tell you why. Because someone who has studied a lot of leadership in my life, also the influence of sales around that, and being able to articulate ideas and concepts and bring people forward, is examples of great leaders. And what I think you're highlighting there is the ability for all this technology, all this AI, we're going to have access to it all, but to be able to have leaders that can stand and build the vision of what it could look like in its adaptation and really kind of sell that curiosity, sell that vision, sell that enthusiasm to bring people aboard. I think leaders, we need to continue to cultivate, as you said, and give space for them to really rise and speak, because that's what's going to move the culture. Whereas AI will potentially move the technology in different ways, but the culture and allowing people to decide, hey, where do my values really land here? What do I really believe in? How do I want to support? And that's through that communities and articulation of leaders sharing big ideas to big audiences. So I fully agree with you. I think that's
Well said.
a wonderful place for us to lean into. So, Kristin, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. I love the work that you're doing in the world. It's super valuable. For people that want to continue to follow you and get a hold of you, where's the best place that they can do that?
Oh, they can find me. The easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. So Kristin Barbato, easy to find me there. It's always updated, usually. But my contact information is right in there. Feel free to just message me, and I'm happy to respond and see how I can help, or even just listen and gain insight on a new idea.
Awesome. For my audience, I'll put those links and the links to the websites that Kristin represents in the show notes. To our audience, if you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, subscribe, share it with somebody inside clean tech or the renewables that could be, jazzed up by the work that Kristin does in the world. Kristin, once again, thank you so much for being here. To our audience, this is another episode of Blue Ocean Solutions Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.